So I wish to welcome the participants of this second session. First of all, George Paparsenos, and thank you, George, for responding to our invitation and helping us to moderate this second session. But I'm taking the opportunity to welcome our colleagues and partners, Gina Cohen from Israel. Hello, Gina. Andrey Konoplyanik, Professor Konoplyanik from Russia. Gokhan Yardim from Ankara. Are you in Ankara, Gokhan?
Yes, Kostis, I'm in Ankara. It's a rainy day.
Okay. And Slavtcho Neykov from Sofia. Hello, Slavtcho. So, George, you have a very good group of experts from around the region, and wish you the best of luck.
Dear attendants of the webinar, dear speakers, good afternoon. The subject of the session, the second session, is gas market integration and market dynamics in Southeast Europe. Let me make a very short introduction to the subject. The natural gas market in Southeast Europe is highly dependent on imports and fragmented with different levels of development, including countries with no development at all. Cross-border trading is effectively very limited or non-existent. There are elements of national legislation and regulation, as well as operating or under construction natural gas infrastructure that would potentially allow for the development of gas trading in a more mature way, competitive and liquid, as in gas hubs in Europe and in the United States. However, the introduction by the European Commission of the notion of sustained economic activities and the associated proposed restrictions on the use of natural gas as a fossil fuel lead to a reapproach of gas market development. The shift of priorities in gas market developments is inevitable towards decarbonization, replacing gradually largely imported natural gas by low carbon electricity or biomethane, hydrogen and synthetic gases, to some extent domestically produced. The session, as Mr. Stavoulis mentioned, is honored by the participation of 4 distinguished speakers. Dr. Professor Andrey Konoplyanik from Russia, Mr. Gokhan Yardim from Turkey, Mr. Slavtcho Neykov from Bulgaria, and Dr. Gina Cohen from Israel. Dear speakers, welcome. I would like to draw your attention that the suggested time allocation for all speakers is no more than 10 minutes each. Please respect this time allocation so as at least 10 minutes of discussions will be available at the end of the session. The first speaker is Dr. Professor Andrey Konoplyanik.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Advisor, let me introduce your credits. He is advisor to Director General Gazprom Export, co-chair from the Russian side of the Work Stream 2 Internal Markets of Russia-European Union Gas Advisory Council, and member of Scientific Council for System Research in Energy in the Russian Academy of Sciences. Please, Mr. Konoplyanik, proceed with your presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I will respect time restriction. I put my bullet points and double check, so I will take no more than 10 minutes. Greetings to all the participants from deep inside Russia. I am now in between Moscow and St. Petersburg at the Upper Volga. So let me say my greetings from this excellent place. You see the title of my presentation. I pay your attention to the disclaimer. I present my personal, I will say, academic views. My presentation, of course, would be better placed at one of the next sessions. But unfortunately, I have to leave at 3:30 precisely to moderate another conference. So organizers kindly gave me opportunity to speak at session number 2. My presentation is about how I personally see mutually beneficial cooperation between Russia and the European Union in gas decarbonization. On the one hand, this will make European Union decarbonization cheaper, and thus will increase welfare of the European Union citizens. On the other hand, this scenario opens new market niches for gas. Gas as a source of clean hydrogen, which means without direct CO2 emissions, in case if pyrolysis technologies are used. This will increase monetization of gas reserves, including, of course, of Russian gas, and welfare of Russian citizens. And this is a mutually beneficial path for the two, for Russia and the European Union. And we are interdependent, since we are closely and historically linked to each other with cross-border, capital-intensive, long-distance, large-scale, and, which is very important, immobile infrastructure, which shall not become a stranded asset under unrealistic decarbonization paths. Natural gas in this respect is clearly a destination fuel from my point of view, not a transit, not a bridge, not a transition fuel. Sorry for those who disagree with this. This is my answer to the question placed in the end of the IENE background paper, very last sentence, page number 16. Within 10 minutes or even less now, I have no time to voice arguments, nor in favor of my views, nor against the views that I do consider counterproductive. So I will leave all arguments in my presentations for your homework after the conference is over, and will just demonstrate my key summary vision presented at slide number 8, which is self-explanatory. I can, of course, make a special presentation on this issue sometime if you would wish so. So I will leave the slide on the screen, but will speak on something different, very important for gas, which happened in recent days after we have agreed with the organizers on the topic of my presentation. My understanding is that gas industry is in danger, at least in Europe. Gas is being, by purpose, discredited, invalidated, based on wrong perceptions. This distorts the frame of reference in which political decisions on decarbonizations are taken. On the one hand, it is considered as if natural gas is bad in principle, since it is a fossil fuel and thus it holds carbon molecules which will, as if inevitably, lead to CO2 emissions. That approach, from my view, denies scientific and technical progress which can diminish direct CO2 emissions to the tolerable level or even prevent them, as under, for instance, pyrolysis technologies of hydrogen production from natural gas, which are just ignored, sorry to say this, in European Union hydrogen strategy, sorry. On the other hand, gas is being discredited, invalidated based on wrong perceptions, as if renewables are clean and creates no emissions through their business cycle. I will put this slide here. This perception is stated in European Union hydrogen strategy in definitions, in that section definitions, as a given fact. I argue that this is a wrong perception. In my backup slides, here's one of those, slide 12, because in European Union hydrogen strategy, the very material intensive, which means energy intensive, thus with high emissions, footprint, production of renewable equipment is just excluded from calculations in carbon footprint of renewable energies, which is presented in this slide or in this slide, which is sourced from Olivier Vidal book. And as Dan Yergin said recently, and I put this on the slide number 12, that new supply chains for net zero carbon requires carbon. I fully agree with my old friend, Dan Yergin. They require diesel to operate shuttle in mining. I just put aside geopolitical perceptions, which add to deformation of the frame of reference for political decisions, which thus became distorted, as if clean domestic electrons will substitute as if dirty foreign molecule. I will put aside this slide on the screen. Such deformed political decisions, since taken within distorted frame of reference, create their distorted domino effects, like decision of European Investment Bank as of November 2019 to stop financing by 2022 all projects related to fossil fuel industries, including gas infrastructure projects. And this is at the time when internal European Union gas market is not yet adequately interconnected. The host of our event, Professor Stambulis, has presented then in 2019 his excellent critical analysis of these European Investment Bank decisions in one of the IENE's bulletin. And I advise the audience to read this comment. The heated up atmosphere in favor of renewables and against fossil fuels based on distortions leads to competition of ambitions between politicians of the individual states. And I hope that all of us do know the difference between the terms politician and statesman, as was defined by Winston Churchill. The race between politicians aimed at next elections is who will provide more radical decarbonization paths, non-dependent, how rational they are and how achievable and at what cost price, if achievable at all. The aim is to make favor to the new electorate, which is young, radical, not much technically knowledgeable, and is ready to deny the murky past in favor of the promise of the bright future. Two recent events in energy show the increasing danger of such race as if in favor of climate protection, and thus against conventional energies based on wrong perceptions. And I would like to address them in the rest 4 minutes. First, recent court decision in the Hague against Shell as of 26th of May might create bad precedent, bad legal precedent. It has already converted soft law language of Paris Agreement, which sounds as member states shall endeavor, to a hard law language of the court decision, Shell company shall, yes? This creates a legally binding obligation for the company to diminish overall emissions of all three types, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, at least by 45% by 2030. These now legally binding aims are established by external institution, the Court of General Practice, who is not competent nor in energy, nor in economic policy, nor in cost-benefit analysis. But it creates a bad precedent, since it might be followed by a wave of similar claims and court decisions to be well met by public opinion, which by definition does not like big companies. And big energy companies are well associated with the murky past, and big aims are more noticeable. Second event, it is the recent IEA report, Net Zero to 2050. This report, from my point of view, was broadly misinterpreted. It is generally considered as if IEA proposes to stop investing in oil and gas and other non-renewable energy sources to reach 2050 net zero political targets. And commentators are blaming Fatih Birol and his team for inadequate appeals, since it is well understood that it is irrational to stop investing in oil and gas. IEA was even claimed by some in incompetence of their conclusions. But from my view, the conclusion of IEA report is totally different from what is generally perceived. Though Fatih cannot say, of course, directly, since the governments who sponsor IEA will not allow IEA to do this. This will be considered politically incorrect in the current public opinion dominated by radical and driven by marginal Greens. Political leaders of IEA sponsor states, which are OECD countries, compete with each other today in who is more ambitious in climate net zero agenda to correspond to public opinion's expectations of their nations or their electorate. Fatih has clearly shown that such ambitious political climate aims deviate from rational economic behavior and decisions. So the rush for climate neutrality based on irrational and distorted frame of reference shall be brought back into the corridor of rational economic behavior and decisions. This irrationality became possible since the climate-related alarmist atmosphere has been created in today's society. Like it was created in early 70s when report to Club of Rome, The Limits to Growth, was published. It was no less alarmist than today's climate reports. Limits to Growth was based on wrong perceptions, just as today's climate-related political ambitions. It addresses scarcity of natural resources to support economic growth and growth of population, based on proved recoverable oil reserves, which is a tiny portion of resources in place. This approach denies de facto scientific and technological progress and belief in human intellect, like it repeatedly happens today. Very soon, wrong perceptions of Limits to Growth report about scarcity of natural resources were disposed by life and by famous, since then, phrase of Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Yamani that Stone Age ended not because of lack of stones.
Professor,
and two final points.
Please accelerate your presentation.
And two final points, two final sentences. IEA report shows that ambitious political aims of politicians deviates from rational economic decisions and behavior which would have probably been taken by statesmen. Court decision against Shell shows that courts can also deviate from rational economic behavior, as it was earlier demonstrated by European Investment Bank financial policy decision. The two decisions of court and of the bank taken under inspiration of ambitious political decisions of politicians. Maybe now, ambitious political aims should be adapted closer to rational economic behavior. Until nowadays, it happened other way around. Deviation from rational economic decisions and behavior of three major social systems, political, legal, financial, which are the keystones of current democratic societies, is too dangerous for the society, even if driven by best intentions. The cost of wrong investment decisions based on exaggerated political ambitions might be too high for the society. And the final sentence. This is why I do consider decarbonization path based on clean hydrogen production from natural gas without direct CO2 emissions based on pyrolysis technologies as a mutually beneficial solution for Russia and the European Union, since it is closer to rational economic behavior compared to more radical, politically inspired endeavors. And that's the end of my comments. And thank you for your attention. I will just show you the rest of my slides, which you can admire and educate and consider and criticize after the conference is over. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Konoplyanik, for your presentation. The next speaker is Mr. Gokhan Yardim, who is a partner and manager of ADG Anadolu Naturalgas Consultancy, a trade limited in Turkey. Please, Mr. Yardim, proceed with your presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee and Mr. Kostis Stambolis for inviting me to this event. I would like to tell you about the gas market's transition in Turkey. It is told that renewables are leading the global energy transition. However, the ongoing transition cannot simply be described by shifting from fossil fuels to renewables, but it is rather a transformation with much broader implications. That's why in my presentation, I will talk about natural gas power generation shifting to renewables and their effects to natural gas market in Turkey. Turkey faced with natural gas in the 70s, but main consumption started after signing of natural gas agreement with USSR. The main reason for this was to diversify energy sources, replace poor quality lignite and heavy fuel oil with clean wonder fuel, natural gas, and bring a quick, reliable economic solution to electricity shortage problem. So energy production and environmental issues were the main reasons. Years passed, consumption increased, reached to 57 billion cubic meters in 30 years, and supply sources were diversified. First transition in gas market was institutional changes and preparation of regulations. There was a monopoly market, and Botaş state entity was a monopoly in all natural gas activities. After 2000s, gas and electricity market reforms were on the agenda. Since the import of natural gas started in 1987, the share of natural gas in electricity production started to increase. but the fact that natural gas is an important product and its price was determined in foreign currency and its share in electricity production constantly increases, energy security concept has brought the use of domestic and renewable energies in power generation with increasing deficit in the balance of foreign payments. After ratification of the law of electricity energy production from renewable energy sources in 2010, the first time in 2011, renewable energy share of installed power capacity of Turkey started to increase. Although natural gas power plants have remained in the system as baseload power plants for many years, significant investments have been observed in renewable energy in recent years, especially in wind power plants, followed by solar energy investments. While the power of renewable energy power plants, which are put into use every year with renewable energy resource area tenders made in recent years, increases, there is no progress in natural gas-based power plant capacities, and installed power of CCGTs are almost same then. The installed capacity of electricity is reached 97.4 gigawatt at the end of April this year. The opening of the natural gas investments to the private sector after natural gas market law led to the expansion of city distribution systems, and the use of natural gas on residential sector showed a rapid growth. The pauses of gas use in power production were prevented by the rapid increase in demand in the residential sector. In the last 10 years, except for the year 2018, natural gas consumption in residence has increased every year. With the use of natural gas instead of coal in houses, 35 million tons of carbon emissions have been saved in 2020. And the total emission value saved in the houses in the last 3 years has approached around 100 million tons. As natural gas consumption increased in the residential sector, differences in seasonal consumption began to appear. And as a result, more natural gas was needed in the winter, so underground natural gas storage began to be developed. Natural gas markets have led to the establishment of new LNG liquefaction facilities with the shale gas revolution in the USA. Current entry capacity from 11 main points is 330 million cubic meters per day, will reach to 468 million cubic meters per day. Storage capacity is 4.6 BCM and will reach to 10 BCM. There are 2 LNG terminals and 2 FSRUs, and one is under construction, Saros Bay, and 1 FSRU ship, Naturalgas, 170,000 cubic meters liquid capacity exists in the Turkish natural gas system. As Turkey's long-term purchase contracts expires and the sellers in long-term purchase contracts are not flexible enough about price and formula and take or pay, Turkey has turned into the international LNG markets and increased the amount. Accordingly, Turkey has become an important player in the international LNG market, ranking 9th in the world LNG imports. It rose to the 4th rank in Europe as well. Turkey is the 3rd largest importer of American LNG in Europe after Spain and UK. This year, 15 BCM long-term purchase contract will be expired. Shah Deniz first contract, 6.6 BCM, when I was CEO of Potash, negotiated and signed, has already been expired. Blue Stream 16 BCM contract will be expired at the end of 2025. Iranian contract will be expired in 2026. As long as there are no flexible conditions in the price formula, duration, destination clause in the long-term purchase contracts, Turkey prefers to get needs from international markets, including spot pipe gas. An application regarding the import of 2.7 billion cubic meters of natural gas from Iraq is waiting on the agenda of EMRA. Also, Turkey is well-established gas market as the largest gas consumption center in the region. A regulated gas market, developing gas exchange. I'm sure EPIA's representative will tell you more in a few minutes. With a physical developed natural gas infrastructure, is a candidate country to be the most economical transit route for the East Med gas. TANAP and Turkish Stream were put into operation, and TAP and Bulgarian connection were completed, and Turkey has become an important transmission natural gas country to Southeast Europe through TAP to Europe as well. As we all know, Turkey was a reliable partner and supplied 25% of Greece natural gas through Turkey-Greece interconnecting pipeline. I believe that existing Turkish-Greece interconnection pipeline and Malkoçlar-Stranca pipelines will work in two directional. After signing of interconnection agreements, will help security of supply in Southeast Europe and enhance cooperation in the region, and gas markets in Turkey, Greece, and Bulgaria will get benefits because of competition and price signals received from EPIAS. As we all know, TPAO announced a gas discovery with a potential of 320 BCM lean gas, representing the largest in the Black Sea in 2020. Second discovery in the lower section of Tuna-1 well, adding another 85 BCM lean gas to its Sakarya gas field in October 2020. And third discovery 4 days ago on the Amasra-1 well on the same field. So total discovery revised as 540 BCM. Goal is to produce the first gas by early 2023. It will be 10 million cubic meters per day and will reach 40 million cubic meters per day. Ladies and gentlemen, I will end my words with hydrogen. According to the Turkish Hydrogen Technologies Association, hydrogen production from 100% renewable energy is possible in Turkey. So zero dependency in the hydrogen economy should be targeted. With the transition to hydrogen in our country until 2030, it is thought that approximately 130,000 jobs will be created during the transition to the hydrogen economy. According to the results of life cycle analysis, by mixing 20% hydrogen into natural gas by volume in all sectors using natural gas until 2030, carbon dioxide emissions will decrease by 18.5%, while nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide emissions will decrease by 17 and 16%. The Turkish Gas Distribution Association, GASBIR, and its
Mr. Yardim, please speed up your presentation.
I have just 2 minutes. GASBIR and its technical center have encouraged the inclusion of their resources in the natural gas distribution network for hydrogen injection technologies and using green energy throughout the country. Research and development studies have been initiated with the Ministry of Energy and EMRA. Natural gas and hydrogen were mixed in certain proportions in detail, and of its use in devices are being investigated. As we know, Turkey's gas transmission and distribution systems are very young. This infrastructure can be used after blending with hydrogen. It can go step by step. It can be started by 5%, then up to 20%. We think that the current gas system can easily be adapted. According to the report of Şihura Energy Transition Center and Bilkent University, the use of green hydrogen production from renewable power could be broader in the future as a pillar to reduce emissions in Turkey's end-user sector. And if the areas from manufacturing industry, buildings, and transport, according to the report, it may offer $45 billion investment if 5% of Turkey's total final energy consumption would be covered by green hydrogen. So as a summary, natural gas transition in Turkey, first market reforms, institutional changes, transition from power generation to residential sector, more LNG and FSRU, flexible gas purchase contracts, and blending with hydrogen. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yardim. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Slavtcho Neykov.
Hello.
Who is chairman of the board of managers of the Energy Management Institute in Bulgaria. Mr. Neykov, please proceed with your presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I will disappoint you, but I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I have prepared only one summary slide for your information with 3 points which I want to share with you. I first of all want to thank the previous speakers and also IENE about introducing realism in our debate, because I think that this is exactly what we need. And from this point of view, I would like to share my views on the topic of the gas liberalization from 3 perspectives: the European, the regional, and the national one. And I will take a lot of references to the paper which was presented by IENE, which I think is exactly in the direction of realism. I think it's a very good paper. So at European level, when we talk about gas and gas market developments, the common issue is that we share same goals, but unfortunately, we suffer very individually. We have individual problems. And Professor Konoplyanik was very right when he mentioned that it might seem that gas was to a very big extent discredited, or there have been attempts to discredit it. But we have to also be sure that there is also objective facts which lead to this discreditation, because the energy market in general terms, and not only in gas, has changed substantially in the recent years, and this refers both to sources, both to participants, to the type of consumption. Everything has changed drastically in this context, and I fully share the understanding which was expressed in the report prepared by IENE as a background paper, that there is inconsistency when we consider EU policy targets and what happens in real terms in individual countries. And here, when referring to the European level, please note that I do not mean only EU member states. I also refer to all countries in the Europe, because you know that along different types of partnerships and the energy community process and so on, in practical terms, the rule of law is more or less the same. Let me underline that, unfortunately, in the context of this discreditation for which Professor Konoplyanik spoke, there is also a lot of politics behind. He is certainly the one who can speak much more about the Nord Stream 2 developments and the mess between politics and economy in this context. But it would be fair to say that there is a strong reconsideration between among the European Union, in particular, when it comes to the relations with Russia. And in the context of gas, the EU-Russia partnership has not only more than 50 years of traditions, but it has also its ups and downs. And this is a fact which we cannot simply put aside, the political fact. At the same time, if you look at the Green Deal issue, which is on the top of the EU agenda, and not only of the EU, but also of the other European countries, we should clearly note that gas is definitely not on the top On the 18th of May this year, the European Parliament, along the ordinary legislative procedure, adopted on a first reading the regulation on the Just Transition Fund. And I want to read for you, to quote, a piece of Article 9 of this draft regulation, which concerns the exclusion from the scope of support. It says investments related to production, processing, transport, distribution, storage, or combustion of fossil fuels. Please note, the reference is not to coal, the reference is to fossil fuels. And the last point which I want to make when it comes to the European level is linked to other initiatives. You know that now there is a very strong initiative which is which unites 12 EU member states, including Bulgaria, but also the United States. It is the 3 Cs initiative. And very recently there was an event less than a month ago. And one of the key messages which was heard during this event was dump gas, something which I've put on the top of my slide. This is just an illustration of objective considerations, what will happen with gas. When it comes to the regional level, my second point, we all share the EU priorities, including our neighbors which are not EU members. But honestly speaking, I got old listening about projects like YAP, Nabucco, Southern Stream, and the Southern Gas Corridor and all that. There is a reference in the IENE report about Krk. This is something which I personally listened for more than 2 decades. And it started operationally in practical terms at the beginning of this year. And what I mean is that we are facing at regional level a situation when we are combined by priorities, but at the same time, the project development is at a certain level lagging behind, and this lagging behind might turn to be to a situation when some of these projects, due to the change of the market, will have very substantial economic problems when it comes to the justification of their existence. And my last point concerns the national level. Of course, as I said, we all suffer individually. In Bulgaria, for example, let me tell you that 15 years ago, 15 years ago, we used 7.2 billion cubic meters of gas when there were no gas hubs. Now there are a lot of gas hubs, and we are using 60% less gas per annum, which is at the level of approximately 3 billion cubic meters per year. This is one other illustration that the market changes very substantially. Of course, here I can speak a lot about the role of coal. Concretely, in our case, there is the necessity of reconsideration at strategical and legislative level due to the necessity of economic justification of the existing and future gas interconnections. As to wrap up, and I think I will be in time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that without any doubt, we are at a phase when the society, and particularly the politicians leading this society, will have to reconsider the role of gas, particularly when it comes to the regional level considerations, because the market is already jumping with huge steps well beyond the national borders, and it has more and more regional, not to mention the European dimension. Well, thank you very much. This is what I wanted to share with you as key messages. I'm certainly happy to answer questions or to participate in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neykov. Our last speaker is Dr. Gina Cohen. Gina Cohen is a lecturer and consultant on natural gas industry in Israel. Dr. Cohen, please proceed with your presentation.
So what is happening in Israel and in the region of the Eastern Med, which is mostly Jordan and Egypt for this purpose, is that we're going full blast on having and consuming and producing more natural gas. Prior to this, at least in Israel, especially in Israel, most of the electricity was based on coal and liquid fuels. We have no other energy resources besides gas. We have very little wind because the area is not windy. We have no coal because we're not willing to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Committee. We have no hydro, and we have of course solar. We have solar energy, but because Israel is a very, very dense and quite a small and densely populated country, so we have only solar energy capacity to produce at 19% of the year. So currently the renewable capacity in Israel, the actual production is 5.6%, which is very, very low. So the ministry keeps on making statements that they want to reach a much higher level of renewable energy. And the latest statement is that it wants to reach 30% by 2030. Since to date, it has missed every other goal and every other target, because the target was supposed to be 10% by the end of 2020, and it was half that. I would like to presume, and I presume that it will not reach the next goal of 30% by 2030. So currently Israel is producing gas, is moving towards gas, is talking a lot about gas in every sphere, in industry, in power, in transportation, not in households. We don't have any gas in households. It's quite a hot country, and it's easier and cheaper to bring the gas to electricity and to bring the electricity to the homes. So Israel has for now 1,000 BCM of gas discovered. It is consuming 12 BCM a year. And last year, it started exporting for the first time to Egypt. And in 2020, we exported 2.5 BCM to Egypt and 2.1 BCM to Jordan. Egypt, although has more gas than it needs, it is producing about 70 BCM a year and consuming only 60. It wants to import more gas from Israel. It's going to probably import about 5 BCM a year this year, and Jordan is probably going to import about 4 BCM. And so the whole region, Egypt, Jordan, maybe the Palestinians, also Cyprus, are all going to become more interconnected via gas pipelines, and will be exporting to one another the gas. But in order to achieve greater unitization and monetization of the gas, what is needed is to get this gas, the Israeli gas especially, to the greater world, because Egypt, yes, is taking about 5 a year, and Jordan is taking 4, but Jordan is moving very fast on renewables because Jordan has a lot of solar energy. It is a much bigger country. There's a much less dense population. So they are about at 15%, and they're moving ahead to 20% of renewable solar energy. And Egypt is also moving ahead quite a lot with solar energy and wind energy. In order for Israel to be able to monetize its gas, it wants to export the gas to Europe or to Asia. So it's looking at 2 projects. The 2 projects in question are the Poseidon project, which is to bring the gas via pipeline from Israel to Cyprus via Crete and mainland Greece to Italy. So there's this company called Poseidon, which is a 50% Greek and 50% Italian company that wants to build a pipeline which will cost between $7 and $9 billion in order to bring about 10 BCM a year of Israeli and or Cypriot gas to Israel, to Europe. And Israel is supporting this. The government is supporting this project, is not really listening at the noises coming out from Europe, is not really listening at what the banks are saying about investing less or about Europe moving ahead to renewables. It's listening more and looking more at the statistics that for the next 15 to 20 years, despite all the talk that is happening, that Europe will be consuming more gas. It's going to sort of increase consumption of gas until it plateaus, and only in about 10 or 15 years will gas consumption fall. So Israel is looking at that. The problem with this is that it might be a little bit too little too late, because it's going to take at least 5 years to build such a pipeline. FID on the project has not been taken. So if a pipeline will be in line between Israel and Europe in 2025, 26, it needs 15 years in order to be profitable. It might be right towards the end of the beginning of bringing new pipeline gas into Europe. So it's a difficulty. The other difficulty is contrary to Gazprom, which is fully or partially state-owned. The Israeli government is not willing to invest any money in any export project. It wants to give it all to the private sector. I had a meeting with the Director General of the Ministry last week, and I said, listen, if you want Israel to export gas, you have to put your hands in your pocket, or you have to improve the regulation. At least, in the very least, you have to remove any impediments you have put. So the argument was it was extremely complex to do a sales agreement between Israel and Egypt. It was the most complex project ever, and therefore they trust the gas companies that they will be able to do other projects for export. I said to them, yes, doing a project between Israel and Egypt was complex, but it was not the most complex project, because there was a pipeline already in existence between the North Sinai and the south of Israel. And all it needed was sort of like a commercial agreement and, of course, geopolitical agreements. But doing an LNG project or a pipeline to Europe is more complicated. But they didn't take my word for it. So what came out of the ministry about 3 or 4 days ago is that they realized that from the 1,000 BCM of gas discovered, that there's a big chance that not all of it will ever be produced. So they have removed, the document has not yet been issued for public domain, so I have not read it yet, but they have announced it in the press that they are removing a lot of the impediments to export. And they had 2 committees which had given volumes and quotas of what amount of gas could be exported in total from the 1,000 BCM and from each field. So the quota was about 40% could be exported. It is understood that this is going to be increased to 52%. So if 400 BCM could be exported, nowadays it's probably going to increase by another 100 BCM at least. And the reason they have said this is because they're saying that they're going to move ahead with renewables and gas will be consumed less in Israel. And therefore they want to be able to enable for more exports. The 2 problems with this issue is that, okay, they're saying that gas will be consumed less in Israel and there'll be more renewables, but they're doing very little or nothing in order for the renewables to move ahead. And whilst they're making and imposing more worries about those that want to invest in consumption of gas in Israel, because if they think it's like it's going to come to an end soon, they may not invest in new pipelines and new power stations. I had a conversation this afternoon with a power company, and they said, well, you know, if it's going to move ahead with renewables, then maybe we can buy gas at $3. And I said, maybe you can buy gas at $3 on paper, but if you do, whoever will sell that to you will go bankrupt, because it's very deep, expensive offshore gas projects. And at $3, somebody may indeed sell you that gas, but you'll never get the gas because they'll go bankrupt and it'll be just a statement for the stock market, but you won't get the gas. So it's confusing people, because if they think that the gas won't all be monetized, they can think they can get it cheaper. So they're not making steps to buy gas or making steps to maybe, you know, invest in infrastructure. On the export front, the ministry has stated that, okay, exports can increase, but they're not willing to invest any money in this. The main project beside the Poseidon project, which is a 2,100 kilometers between Israel and Europe, is LNG. And what they're looking at is to bring Israeli gas down to the Egyptian facilities. There are 2 facilities in Egypt, so the Damietta, which is closer to Israel, and the Itku facility. In the meantime, the companies here, the private companies, are looking more towards Itku for the simple reason that Itku has both investors, which is Shell, Petronas from Malaysia, and Total, which have long-term contracts, but also there's the ability to use this facility as a tolling station. And Shell and Chevron, which is now the operator of all the gas fields, or the 2 developed gas fields in Israel, are discussing the possibility of making a deal with Shell either to sell gas via the facility or maybe to buy out Shell or to maybe buy out Petronas from the facility. The facility in Nico is getting gas mostly from an offshore field which belongs to BP called WDDM. This gas is going to be replenished towards 2023, 2024. So they are looking for additional sources of gas. Bringing gas from Israel is not void of complexities because it has to go through three pipelines, the internal pipeline in Israel, the pipeline between Israel and Egypt, and then the internal pipeline in Egypt, which is going to cross the three pipelines together before it gets to the facility, about $1.30 in MMBTU. Or there's the option of building a pipeline directly from the Leviathan field to Itku. The advantage of this, it's less complicated. You don't have to make three different transmission contracts, but it is more commercially risky because you have to build a new pipeline rather than just sort of maybe selling it per year. So these are the options, and this is what Israel is looking at. And my time is up, so I'll leave whatever time there's left at the end for questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cohen.
Okay.
So I think it's time to proceed with the discussion. Does Mr. Stabolis want to interfere in this part of the discussion at this moment, or should we proceed with the questions?
George, go ahead. I'm just listening. I'm following what you say. You are having the.
Thank you, Mr. Stabolis. There is a question from Mr. Adamopoulos for Mr. Yardim. The question is as follows. Can you assure us of the existence of the new Black Sea gas fields as officially announced, and how do you expect it to affect Turkey's energy balance in the future? Mr. Yardim, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The official announcement was done also for the Turkish Petroleum Corporations. It's a state company, and they made the announcements in Turkish and English also. So, of course, starting from 2017, there is a policy of the national and domestic energy policies. So Turkey would like to use that its own domestic resources. So the natural gas consumption is around 55 to 60 BCM right now. And I think that this 20-25% of this gas is going to be used in the national system. So it will make a positive effect because Turkey is a import-dependent country. So I think that starting from 2023, although it is very, it is not easy to get the gas to the shore in 2023, but I think it can be achievable. So starting from 2023, the share of domestic natural gas in Turkey's primary energy source, and also in the natural gas consumption, there will be a national and domestic gas. So I think that it can be achievable project.
Good, thank you. I would like to raise the following question to all of you. Now in Southeast Europe, most of the natural gas used is imported. One way to reduce this dependence is by developing biomethane that that can be used easily in the existing infrastructure. What is your opinion on that? Can we start with Mr. Yardim, because you are...
Yeah, I think in my presentation and in my speech, I already told that the Turkey's natural gas system, transmission system, distribution systems are very young. So but Turkey is also very rich in the renewable energies. So I think that it is more logic for Turkey to produce hydrogen from renewable energy instead of biomethane. Of course, the biomethane and other gases will decrease the import dependency. But I would like to add a few words about the Green Deal because the developed countries used fossil fuels many years, and they became a developed country. Now, and they made a profit and used their profit, that profit to develop a new technologies. Now they come and say that, look, fossil fuels, especially the wonder fuel, natural gas is dirty fuel. So let's use the hydrogen. So this is not a fair deal, I guess. So if the developed countries use the fossil fuels for many years, they have to pay it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can add few words if you wish, or maybe ladies first, and
yes.
I can afterwards. Can I say something?
Yes.
Then I would like to echo what Mr. Yardim was saying about the fact that industrialization that brought the per capita income level in some developed economies, and including in Europe, Europe is not homogenic, yes, so which brought the per capita income in Northwestern Europe much higher than, for instance, in Southeastern Europe. Yes, definitely now to blame that fossil fuel is bad, as you have just mentioned, as Mr. Neykov has mentioned, as I has mentioned. From my point of view, it's an unfair deal, and it's based on distortions. So coming back to biomethane, frankly speaking, again, it's my personal views. It's not my company views. I'm only speaking as a person as Konoplyanik in my academic capacities. I do not believe too much in biomethane. Why so? Because when the self-dependency or decreasing dependency on import is the aim, when you have only one supplier, that's one story. But now Southeastern Europe definitely has multiple suppliers. And since you have a lot of regasification terminals, that does mean that gas inside Europe need to compete with global supply. Yeah. So from that point of view, that's totally different picture to speak about not very big source and quite maybe costly source of biomethane, which need to be added into the gas transportation grid, which inevitably create some contractual issues that need to be developed. So from my point of view, it's better to consider what other options related to gas can be found. Here, I do think that decentralized gas supplies might be one of the options. That's why I'm looking, for instance, for small-scale LNG as an option. And Mr. Stambulis do know, let me say, one of my ideas that maybe it's possible to create the Black Sea Danube market for small-scale LNG, where from deep inside this area, small-scale LNG supplies can be in cryogenic tanks supplied on a non-grid basis, not through the wholesale market, as it's the matter with the pipeline gas, but immediately to the retail market. So that option, from my point of view, from my humble opinion, might be even better than biomethane. So when we're speaking about competition between gas and other sources, definitely, and Mr. Neykov has mentioned this, we need to understand that what happening today is totally different from the situation 20 years ago, or for instance, from situations of the 70s, when very famous United States program Energy Independence was incorporated. And then after 30 years, it created the US shale gas revolution. So today, when all the supplies are competing in the global gas market, situation is totally different. So I prefer in this case, find alternative for gas and to decarbonize gas, not necessarily in Southeast Europe to bring it to the hydrogen, but to use gas as the cleanest at all compared, for instance, for lignite or coal. And so to think this way. I will stop here to give another panelist to say a word.
Okay,
so
thank you very much. Dr. Cohen, could you please...
As I said, Israel's got 1,000 BCM of gas. We're not importing. We're looking to export. For the meantime, we're not there. There's a different phase. So I can't add anything to this argument for now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neykov, could you please...
Thank you very much, Chair. I also think that swapping from one source of energy to another very voluntarily is quite abstract for the moment. I mentioned in my statement when it comes to the national level views about Bulgarian concrete, we have now very big discrepancy between what we have in our energy strategy and what is in real terms. In our energy strategy, we are still relying on 2,000 megawatts new nuclear capacities, which is complete abstract, but this is a decision taken by the parliament. We are constructing something which our politicians call Balkan Stream, but in fact it's part of the Turkish Stream. And in real terms, there is not sufficient data about the economics of this project. So on this ground, jumping from nuclear to gas and then going to biomethane, hydrogen, and so on, at the current status at national level, it is unrealistic. So this is why I stated in my position, in my wrap-up, that politicians need to reconsider in real terms where exactly we stand. We are part of the European Union, and as such, we follow the overall energy policy trends of the European Union, which we are binded to do also by the European Union legal framework. But we need to do first our homework at home, and in my view, it will be absolutely abstract if we start considering now biomethane. I think I answered this question.
Thank you very much for your contribution to the second session. Is Mr. Stabolis available?
Yes, I'm here, yes. George, I wish to thank you for your expert help in moderating this session. I think it brought a lot of pragmatism, as Slavtcho said, into the debate. The small piece of pragmatism I want to infuse in this, additionally, is this. We are talking about biomethane. But you have to bear in mind that in Greece, for example, where we have developed a lot of our natural renewable resources, but also in Turkey, and Gokhan could help qualify this, can correct me. We have been working many years on renewables. Okay, we have developed wind and solar, and in Turkey, geothermal. Fantastic. How much biogas have we developed? Very little. In Greece, maybe we have 50 megawatt operating biogas facilities, maybe. And we have about 3.5 gigawatt wind and another 3 gigawatt solar. So what has been happening? Obviously, it's not a very attractive proposition commercially. So are we going from now until 2030 to develop maybe 1.1, 1.5 gigawatt biogas? I very much doubt it. I don't know what the situation in Turkey. I suspect is the same. Perhaps Turkey is more advanced because they have more agricultural production.
I don't have real figures with me right now, but as the Greece, we don't have much biomethane.
It's very small. It's very small. So unless incentives are given for producers of waste from animal waste and agricultural waste, you cannot have biomethane production. Unless I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know my chemistry, but biomethane is because bio. It is in the word. It's based on natural, that is agricultural, and animal waste. So you need a lot of agricultural and animal waste, and maybe some recycled industrial to produce bioethane. So how is this bioethane going to be produced? I mean, it's a question mark. I don't know. Maybe it could be produced. Maybe we should have a chemical engineer in our, in our group who could enlighten us on this. But on the basis of current information, I cannot see masses and masses of bioethane being produced. Maybe we are going to have, but not that huge amount. I don't know. That's my comment. Okay.
Yeah, only small amounts, individual, maybe off-grid production, but not large scale that can be a reliable supply for the whole country, for instance. Here, I fully agree with you, Professor Stamboulos. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I think maybe it's based on wrong perceptions, because it's based on perception that security of supply can be provided by self-sufficiency. So any source of self-sufficiency as if it is good. But when you have the global gas market, and it's now in the making, and if you have the international gas supplies and multiple supplies, again, I would like to refer to Winston Churchill, whom I like very much. His citation from 1911, security of oil is diversity, diversity, and diversity. The same in gas. Now there is diversity of gas supplies, both on the wholesale market, retail market, small-scale LNG, large-scale LNG, pipeline gas, LNG. So all the opportunities. And they are much more economically efficient than these new things like biomethane, which I fully agree with you, conflicting with agriculture. In your countries, definitely, there will be clear direct conflict between agriculture and intentions to increase biomethane in order to substitute perceived political and secure external supplies. Again, I will stop here because I don't understand we take too much time for our sessions. And sorry to say this, I need to leave now.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the time, for pleasure of being with you, for the opportunity to speak, and see you next time. Sorry that I need to leave now. Thank you.
I think the session is coming to a close anyway.
Okay, that's fine.